Hello everyone. Welcome to the last spotlight in June 2026. And we're heading into the deep summer, which is going to be quite an interesting summer. So, this particular spotlight is all about ET factions. But before we get to that, I have to give you some background to it. So, I want to start in the following way. At Farsight, we always give evidence, direct evidence for anything. If you look at the entire disclosure community, the entire UFO, UAP community, they're just giving you hearsay. They heard someone told them something. There's nothing there. There's no really direct evidence. And the military, the little videos that they're putting out quite a few videos now. They're of UFOs, UAPs that they say we don't know what these things are. So they're not offering any direct evidence. I have always thought that the best time for Donald Trump to make some discussion about the disclosure thing, recognizing that the extraterrestrials exist, would be the third week in July, or sometime in July. Because we started out with the military starting to release more things. And then we had the Steven Spielberg movie, Disclosure Day. And to me, that has to be coordinated with government stuff. I can't believe that would come out from mainstream media as a Hollywood movie if the government was not involved. They're trying to do something. And there was a press conference with major hitters. Leslie Keane was there, a writer. But they also had David Grush and other whistleblowers. But again, it's always he said, she said. No one's talking about stuff that they have personally seen. Okay? And then next week, this coming week, like within the next few days, we're beginning the 79th anniversary of the Roswell crash. So my thought has always been that Donald Trump desperately needs a win. He's been bogged down with the Iran war. There's been a lot of trouble with the economy. And if he just marches into the fall elections in November with nothing else, the Republicans are risking a lot. So he needs something to sort of show himself as a pioneer. And his children, his sons, know completely about the UFO stuff. I've seen them talk about this. And so this is something that he's got some knowledge of. The question is, there's a lot of people pressuring him not to do it. So I don't really know what's going to happen, but I have a story to tell you that describes the fluidity of the entire ET disclosure thing that I'm going to tell you later, okay? But for right now, I want you to know that Farsight does everything totally opposite what everybody else does. Everybody else is he said, she said. It's all hearsay. Farsight gives you direct evidence of everything. We do remote viewing. All of the people who have ever had any contact or said they had any contact with extraterrestrials, including leaks that are coming out from Area 51 and other things, they all say that the extraterrestrials communicate telepathically. Everybody says that. All the abduction people that have been involved in the abduction programs, including all those people who are written about by John Mack, okay, in his books. Abduction was a famous, and he's dead now. He died, but he was a professor at Harvard, went through hell at Harvard. They tried to remove him from tenure because he dared talk about this stuff. And David M. Jacobs from Temple University, who's retired now also. And I'm the last professor talking about this subject, still standing. Okay, but at Farsight, all the abduction people and everything like that, despite all of that, everybody's still saying he said, she said stuff. Farsight does everything different. We show how remote viewing works, and all the work that was done by John Mack and and David M. Jacobs and everybody else that does anything, everybody says that the extraterrestrials communicate telepathically. Their mind perceives remote viewing type stuff as well as telepathic communication. That's how they do things. It's the humans that are different. But Farsight offers direct evidence of everything. So rather than just showing you that we have remote viewing and this is what we've done and this is our finding, no, we show you how we did it. We record everything on video, blind, totally blind. The remote viewers were totally blind to the target, the nature of the project, everything. We record it on video while they're totally blind. We show you the whole thing raw, and we make our videos very entertaining from that perspective as well. So we give you evidence, direct evidence of remote viewing. And that's important. That's what the extraterrestrials want us to do. They want you to know there is no freedom for anybody on this prison planet if the minds don't elevate. In addition, we show you proof that the UAPs or UFOs actually exist. Now, anybody can doctor any video or still now. They can the way AIs come up with videos that are as persuasive as anything. So you can't believe anything you just see on the internet as a UFO thing. However, we show you how to make your own video recordings with your own camera of UAPs, UFOs, live in the middle of the day using modified cameras that film in infrared and at 120 frames per second, and then how to process them with either DaVinci Resolve Studio, or you can use Adobe Premiere or some other editing programs. But the point is, we show you how to do it. Now you can believe your own videos. You may not be able to believe anything that you see on the internet these days as being real or not, but you can believe your own videos. So we show you evidence that is absolutely incontrovertible. It's absolutely true. But look, folks, there is nothing that makes it more obvious that there are extraterrestrials all throughout the galaxy and the universe than by looking at the stars themselves. Now, let me tell you the honest truth. Farsight now has our own observatory. Now, we have a constant record of showing you everything. We don't like the stars that you're being shown. We don't like the skies that you're being shown. We don't think you're being shown stuff that actually tells you what the situation is. If you actually knew how many stars there are in the sky, if you actually knew how big the Andromeda galaxy is, if you actually knew, if you could see these things with your own eye, you'd say, of course there's extraterrestrials. Look at that. There's places everywhere for them. So in order to take star photography for us, we have our own observatory. Aziz, my son, he runs it. It's in the high desert where no one is. And we have our own observatory, our own Farsight observatory with a cutting edge telescope. And now let me tell you that why looking in the skies is cutting edge, with a cutting edge observatory in a remote desert location is important, because quantity matters. Quantity and quality matters. You can see astronomical photos of this or that, but there's no understanding of how big that is or how many those things are. So we want to show you. Now we have some initial photographs that we got with our telescope, and I want to show you some of these. These were all done by Aziz. He's our Farsight astronomer. And so I want to show you some of these to give you an idea. And when you see these types of things, it's like, oh, whoa. Okay. Well, first of all, let me show you the Andromeda galaxy. So here's a picture of the Andromeda galaxy. Now, the Andromeda galaxy was taken with our telescope. But the key is that Andromeda galaxy, which you are looking at right now, is huge in the sky. It's dim because the stars are far away, so it's not easy to see. But with the telescope, you can see it. So Aziz, my son, he took a picture of that with our telescope. Let me tell you how big that thing is. That picture, if you were to take the moon and put the moon alongside that galaxy in the sky, that galaxy is at least 6 times, maybe 10 times the size of the moon. That's how big it is. You know how big the moon is? The moon is big. It's in the sky, right? It's in the sky. So when you put it right alongside that galaxy, that's how big it is. So if you could see really dim stuff right in the sky, that Andromeda galaxy is huge, and it's right in front of your face. And you don't need a specialized telescope other than the fact that it's dim, and our telescope can take pictures over a long period of time and, accumulate the light. But the basic idea is that galaxy is huge. And when you take a picture of that galaxy, and that galaxy is the same size as our galaxy, approximately, the Milky Way, you can say, and it's not like a dot in the sky like a star. No. It's huge. It's in the sky. It's like big, 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 big. 6, 7, 10 times the size of the moon. It's huge. And then you say, wow, that's close. That's really close. Well, you can't really do that. And I've never had anybody talk about the Andromeda galaxy and how big it is. They just don't do that. But it's like huge. But when you see it and you realize that is a galaxy and it's like so close to us, what? And then when you see some of the other pictures, let me show you some of the other pictures he's got, okay? This is an interesting one. You see that bright star right there in the lower part? That's the Antares star system. He was sort of interested in that, so he wanted you to see what happens when you see the Antares star system. Okay, and now look at this. This is the North American Nebula. It's just a big thing in the sky. It's huge. This is the North American Nebula that's filled with stars and gases and everything. The North American Nebula. There's so many stars in that thing, it's hard to imagine. Okay, and then if you look at this one is called the Owl Nebula. Now, if you look at the Owl Nebula, that's the blue thing that's in the center. And we can make it much bigger, but for right now, that's a blue thing, that blue dot in the center. I can actually blow it up for you right now, but what I really want to show you now is that if you look to the lower right part of that, you see another galaxy. It's like right there. There's another galaxy. And this is with our telescope, and you can see these things so easily, and you see so many. And when you look at the entire Owl Nebula, it's like, whoa, this is amazing. All right, now let me actually show this one. This is the Vega star system. Now, does that look like a dot in the sky? No, that's not a dot. That's a big thing. It's a big thing. These star systems are big, and they're close. They're not far away. They're not far away. So when people say, are we alone in the universe? What the blankety blank are they talking about? We're obviously not alone in the universe. Look at these star systems. They're everywhere. And now astronomers are saying that there's Earth-type planets over a huge proportion of all the star systems that are out there. Huge. There may be like 50% of all the star systems have Earth-type planets, and that's just their guessing. Now, up until 1995, all of the mainstream astronomers were saying we are the only star, that Earth is the only, that our solar system is the only solar system in the universe, not just a galaxy. I know that sounds stupid. It sounds so incredible, but it's true. They were saying that, and the argument they were saying is the conditions that are necessary for planets to form out of the primordial solar nebula are so rare it's probably never happened. That's not science. That's religion. They just didn't want to know that, they didn't want to accept that there could be planets all over the place, because then they'd have to say there's life all over the place, because there's inevitably going to be a lot of M-class planets that are in the warm zone. But look, from a science perspective, the only thing they could say, and I'm a scientist at a major university, but the only thing they could have said, even in 1995, with no direct evidence of planets and other solar systems, is the mean. And you say, yeah, well, we don't have, how are we supposed to get the mean? They had a sample of one, our solar system, this solar system, and that's a sample of one. And that had 9 major planets. 9! Plus an asteroid belt, comets, meteors, junk all over the place. And they said it's improbable that any planets could form over any stars anywhere up until 1995. 1995, that was like yesterday. Now, of course, they're discovering a new planet every week, or 2 or 3 planets every other week. But up until 1995, that's what they were talking about. There were no courses in any university talking about these planets and other star systems. 1995. So the idea is that when you get this stuff from the mainstream, it's junk. So much of it is junk. And they're holding back because they have belief systems. They have religious belief systems. They want to think they're special. They want to do X, Y, Z, whatever. But it's not just blatant truth. So what we offer you at Farsight is blatant truth, because we show you how we collect our data, and we show you how you can collect the data yourself with regard to images, and also we show you how to do the remote viewing yourself. So many people learn how to do remote viewing from Farsight stuff. It's what we do. And we show you, when we have interactions with extraterrestrials, we show you how we're learning to communicate with them telepathically. You can see that in our ET board meetings and our conversations with Harvey, that you can see on farsightprime.com, which is our venue. Now, YouTube is throttling things all over the place, just all over the place, throttling things. Good friend of mine just was in his whole livelihood was on YouTube. His entire he had to build up 2 major channels, and YouTube just demonetized everything, and he wasn't doing anything wrong up until the last week or so. They were, he was one of their star things. Then they just decided they're going to demonetize everything, and so now he's penniless. So the point is that you can't rely on YouTube, so we have to have our own streaming service where we control everything. Otherwise, it's all going to be taken from you. So, I want to give you a story now about how fluid everything is, how disclosure is fluid. So, listen carefully. This past week, I had to go out to a remote location to do conversations with Harvey in the middle of the night, as we do. I recorded it, of course, and you'll see it soon. Actually, we've got lots of things that we're going to be publishing really soon. Oh, by the way, we're going to be publishing a major project on protests that are going to be happening in Europe from now to the end of the year. And that's going to be coming out in a few days. So that's a super major project. And so Aziz is just finishing up on the editing of that thing now, and it'll be out in a few days. So just hold on your seats for this, because times are not easy right now, okay? Okay. All right. So this is my story to explain to you how disclosure is fluid. And this is all tying into the factions idea. Okay, hold on. Oh, wait a second. You know what I've noticed? I notice now that I have I've been talking all about this stuff, and I forgot to bring myself back. You were looking at the Vegas star system. Let me see if any people were complaining on the chat. Okay, no, they weren't complaining on the chat. You're very polite, okay? Anyway, so I have brought myself back so you can see this, okay? All right, so this is the story for describing to you. Oh, by the way, in terms of the star systems, quantity matters. So we want to be able to show you lots of star stuff. We're looking at the skies too. We're not just talking from remote viewing. We physically go out, and the very fact that we have got our own observatory now tells you how serious we take this. Okay. Yeah, and strange things happen at our observatory. You can be sure. Okay. All right. Now, a disclosure: why it is fluid. I was at the beach last week and recording a conversation with Harvey. Now, what I'm going to tell you is totally true. It was a red flag day. 2 red flags is they do not allow anybody in the beach. 1 red flag is you can go in, but you're on your own. Okay? But I'm careful. Now, but because it was a red flag day, for the first time ever in my whole life, and I've been surfing my whole life, I wore a life preserver. Can you imagine that? Surfing with a life preserver. Well, I did. In addition, I had a band on my wrist, which was a magnet, specially designed for chasing away sharks. Shark band. I almost always wear that. And I had a knife. I had my knife on me. Okay. And because the thing is, when you run into a shark, first of all, the magnet usually chases them away. And if one not chased away, sharks are just animals, and they don't like other animals that have stingers. So I don't use the knife to kill a shark, but if I take a knife out and I poke it, it doesn't like that. And so it goes away. All right, but I was prepared. Life preserver, magnet for my shark band's magnet, knife, plus my surfboard. Okay, but it was a red flag day. So I go out, and I was in chest-deep water, which is great. I'm still standing up, and it seems fine. And then I tried to get onto a wave, and I thought, the wave went by and so on. And then I tried to stand up again, and I realized I couldn't stand up. Then I looked at what happened, and I was suddenly, literally in a blink of an eye, I was deep. I was in deep water. I was like way out. I got caught in an undertow. I had never been caught in an undertow before. But like in a matter of seconds, I was 50 to 100 feet out beyond where I was. I was way far away from the breakers, like in the open ocean. And I said, what? How did this happen? It was like seconds ago I could touch the sand underneath me, and suddenly I was way out. Where? And then I said, okay, well, and that's where sharks are. The sharks are out there. Well, I had my shark bands. That's a brand name magnet. I had my knife, and I had my surfboard, and I had a life preserver. So if I was ever going to be prepared, I was prepared. And also, I'm a great swimmer. So typically when you're caught in an undertow, they say go sideways and then get through. But I said, let me see if that undertow is temporary or whatever. So I got up on the surfboard, and I started to paddle in. Okay? And I didn't really notice myself getting much closer to the beach. So I decided to paddle in harder. Paddling harder. And then sooner or later, I noticed that I was getting closer to the breakers. Okay. And then when I got about 50 feet away from the breakers, I tried to stand up, and I could barely touch the ground. So then I paddled harder till I got a little closer to the breakers, and I could clearly touch the ground. And I got closer, and I got into the breakers, and everything was fine. But the point is, it was fluid, meaning I didn't know. I had to be prepared for everything with my shark band's magnet, my knife, my life preserver, and my surfboard. I had to be prepared sort of for everything. I try to be prepared for everything when these type of things happen. And so that's what happened. But it was fluid. I didn't really know. Now, the reason, and I, of course, got back a little closer to the beach, and I continued my surfing. And then a funny thing actually happened. This is a little odd. I usually surf for hours at a time. I mean, like many hours at a time. And when I get back, I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted. I have trouble standing up when I get back to the beach, and and the waves are coming, and they're knocking me over, and I'm standing up again, and it's great exercise. I jog a lot. Every other day I jog 5 miles, but that's like linear. You're going in one direction. When you're surfing, you're being pushed but the water is knocking you over and doing everything for like hours, and when you get done, you're like, you're exhausted, and you can barely stand up. I could barely stand up. Anyway, I get there, but I'm enjoying it, having so much fun, having trouble getting just standing up. So I get to the edge of the beach, and I'm trying to stand up. My surfboard is being hit by the waves, and I'm being knocked down. And this elderly fellow comes up and offers me a hand and says, "Can I help you? Can I help you, fella? You having troubles?" And I looked at him and I sort of insulted. Then I realized what was going on. I said, No, I'm fine. Just leave me alone. Leave me alone. I'm fine. Great. And I got up. But the point is, that is like such great exercise to be knocked over and just being knocked over and standing back up 3 or 4 hours in a day. It's great. And then after a few days of surfing, I come back and I look at myself in the mirror. Boy, am I really fit, because all that exercise, every muscle in every single direction. However, what does this mean to disclosure? Well, it means something very simple. Disclosure does not mean, do the extraterrestrials exist? From what I just showed you here with the star systems, with the Farsight Observatory, from what we've showed you about how to take your own video photography reliably all the time and get lots of them, lots of UFOs, with regard to how to do the remote viewing, how to do the telepathic communication, watching us so you can learn yourself how all this is done, you don't get that anywhere. So disclosure is not, do the ETs exist? That's just mainstream trying to deny or kick the can down the road. Obviously the extraterrestrials exist. The number of stars that are out there are just overwhelming. And even some mainstream physicists that you see say now, I mean really mainstream, that you see on YouTube, and you see them on podcasts all over the place. I don't need to say their names, but they're saying, the only thing they need to do is to figure out how to, some means of travel. And even one very, very mainstream guy had finally admitted, they only have to invent a warp drive, and warp drive came from the physics community. We figured that out first, that there's got to be some way to do that. And so now they're even admitting, there is a way to do that. They just haven't figured out how to do that, but it can be done theoretically. So if you have a civilization that's been around for hundreds of thousands or millions of years longer than us, obviously they figured that out. Look how much technology we've developed in the last 100 years. Okay. So the disclosure issue is not, do the ETs exist? The question of, do the ETs exist, is 100% something that is being pushed by the bad ETs, the ETs that are controlling this planet as a prison. The whole idea of, do they exist? That's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to be focused on. Because they don't want you to be focused on the real question. The question is not, do the extraterrestrials exist? The real part of disclosure is discussing who the ETs are. Who are the extraterrestrials? That's what they don't want you to think about. The reason is that the extraterrestrials have factions. Everybody says, oh, are the ETs real? As if they're just one giant body. I was listening to, a while back, don't listen to them anymore, but a very famous channel who channels this guy who says he's an extraterrestrial, and we did some projects on him, and in fact he is an extraterrestrial. But none of these beings who come across as, through the channeling literature, through the channels, they're not people, they're not individuals, they're groups, they're agencies. And they make the channels, the human channels, think that they're a person sitting in a ship communicating with him and having a heart-to-heart talk. That's not what's going on at all. Those extraterrestrials would never let that type of communication be done by a person. Those are psyops. Those are run by bureaucracies. It's not a person acting sort of funky. Their version of AI is heavily involved with it. That's why the channels have the same exact personality each and every time you communicate with them. Everything is tightly controlled. So what the ETs from the channels really do is they basically say, it's humans that are the bad guys, the military and things like that. And a lot of the disclosure movement is all about humans, the military and so on, being the bad guys. Guys, the military is not the bad guys. That there is one wing of the military that is definitely heavily involved with the bad ETs, but that's just one wing. The rest of the military is very upset with that side, and the military is totally tied up with this whole thing. They're split. Because the other side of the military definitely wants you to know who the ETs are, not whether they exist, which should be obvious, but who they are. And we at Farsight have broken it down into two major categories, what we call the good ETs and the bad ETs. Now, Aziz, he doesn't like this. He thinks we should be getting into more of the subtleties of the different various groups, and there are lots of groups. But the big ones are the good ETs and the bad ETs, and that's not defined by race or species, because the species are on both sides. So both sides have grays, both sides have reptilians, both sides have, well, there's not so many reptilians in the good ETs, but there's some. And both sides have insectoids, and both sides have, human types. Almost all of the contact that we at Farsight have are with human types, humanoid types, and some AIs. Their AIs are really interesting. Their AIs look just like people. I mean, you can't, if you saw them walking down the street, they just look like people. So, but the AIs are as telepathic as everybody else. So the real part of disclosure is who the ETs are. And they have factions. So the two big factions we simply call the good ETs and the bad ETs. So any disclosure effort, listen to this, any disclosure effort that avoids a discussion of the factions is being orchestrated by the bad ETs. Let me repeat that. Any disclosure effort that avoids a discussion of the factions is being orchestrated by the bad ETs. I want to bring this home. I'm going to bring it home, in this case, to the United States. Back in the day, when the United States was just forming, they had a Continental Congress that was really impotent, and then they decided to make it into a stronger Union of the United States, but they had to pass, enough states had to agree to join the stronger union. What they had before had no means of taxation, so they couldn't pay their bills, there was no military, there was no nothing. So they needed something stronger. And so they were trying to pass a new version of the United States and have a constitution. Well, back in those days, in order to pass that constitution, that idea of having a stronger government, they needed to have advertisements. So their version of a toothpaste commercial, advertisements that go out, were called the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers, and they were written by, James Madison, John Adams, people like that. There were three people that wrote most of the Federalist Papers. But today I want to mention Federalist 10, and that was the 10. Now these were essays, okay? They're hard reading today. I mean, these people who wrote these things up for advertising, they were advertising to a very specialized audience that was very well read. They were really intelligent people. That were really, they had gone to school, they had known everything. They were all basically white men that owned a lot of land. So, but that was their version of an advertisement back in those days. They didn't allow women to vote. They didn't allow African Americans, obviously, to vote. They were being held as slaves. But the white men that were allowed to vote, they were not all white men. They had to be land owning as well. So if you were a white person but you just worked for a living, you couldn't vote. You had to be a land owning rich white guy. Okay, and they had these essays that they published using old printing presses, and that were used to help people decide whether they wanted to vote to have a country. And the number 10, it was written by James Madison. So I want to talk a little bit about Federalist 10, because the big discussion back in those days was whether the factions that were going to form in a country would destroy that country. Now, one of the factions that they definitely did not like was the majority faction, with just everybody voting. They did not like that. They didn't trust the majority any more than they trusted any other faction. So they wanted to have ways that the factions could be limited. Because what you could do, they were afraid of a majority faction taking over and suddenly lowering all the taxes, or getting rid of responsibilities, or forcing rich people to pay things. They didn't trust factions. So what they did is they made a country that had a government that was totally tied up. The president was appointed. Now what happens is they had something called an electoral college. We still have the electoral college to this day. And the electoral college had people that were appointed by the state legislatures. Now remember, only rich white people could vote. So rich white people were voting for the state legislatures, and those people were choosing who the people would be that would come to Washington and decide who the president was going to be. So back in those days, there was no direct elections. We still have the electoral college, but we still have mass participation. So things are much different now than they used to be. But this is about the founding fathers and their concern about factions. The Senate was appointed as well. Now we vote for senators these days, but back in those days they were appointed. The only place that you could have sort of direct voting by sort of what you might consider the masses was the House of Representatives. And in addition, the Supreme Court was appointed, and all of the Supreme Court justices were ratified, or their appointment was certified by the Senate, which was appointed. So the president was appointed, the Senate was appointed, the Supreme Court was appointed by those who were appointed. The House of Representatives was the only one that they allowed to have direct participation, and they were the only ones that could vote on taxes. Okay. I guess they figured that the masses didn't want to be taxed much, so that would be a safe one. So the whole issue is faction. So why were the founding fathers so concerned about factions? And in Federalist 10, they're very clear about that. Actually, James Madison's very clear about that. The founding fathers were concerned because factions always form. You cannot avoid factions. Let me repeat that. You cannot avoid factions. There are always going to be people that are grouping up in different ways because there'll be differences of opinion, and eventually those people, they can end up fighting. They can end up having rebellions. They can end up having insurrections. They could end up shooting people. So factions are not a consequence of humans. Factions are a consequence of life just existing. So getting to the disclosure movement, obviously there are extraterrestrials. The very fact that nobody's telling you about factions means that the one faction that currently uses this planet as a prison, to enforce this planet as a prison, that one faction doesn't want you to talk about the other factions. They don't want you. They held off a long time for you even to know that the extraterrestrials, any extraterrestrials, even exist. And now they're desperately trying to prevent you from saying, well, who are these extraterrestrials and what have they been doing all this time? Okay? So that's what the factions are all about. Factions cannot be avoided. So there are going to be factions. So this disclosure thing that I think is going to kick up in July, the one thing I want you to really look for is any discussions anywhere about whether the extraterrestrials have different types of groups who are opposed to one another. And whenever you hear a channeling person saying, you're almost ready to join the warm and fuzzy extraterrestrials who are waiting for you to raise your head out of the sand and join your brothers and sisters in the galaxy who have warm and open arms, bull. That's proof that that particular channel that you're getting is lying to you. There's no place in the universe where there's warm, fuzzy brothers and sisters in the galaxy. It's always factions. You cannot avoid factions. And anyone that just says the whole galaxy is warm and fuzzy and wonderful, we're just waiting for you to get over the bad things that's happening with U.S. military and the military-industrial complex, that's crap. They're lying to you. And that should be enough for you to know, don't believe that person. Period. And remember, those people, the people who are doing the channeling, the humans, they are the best people in the world. And they were chosen by the extraterrestrials to do the channeling because they come across as so honest, so sincere, so hardworking. That's why they were chosen. Okay? That's why they were chosen. The only complaint I have with them is they're gullible. But other than that, they're wonderful people. But the extraterrestrials themselves, they're snakes. And that's a bad thing to call a snake. There's nothing wrong with a snake. But the point is, you know the figure of speech. And so the basic idea is, if people are talking about disclosure and they're not simultaneously asking, who are these extraterrestrials? And what different factions do they have? They're hiding stuff from you. Now, last week, I didn't have a formal spotlight like I had today because I was out on the beach trying not to drown in the ocean. And so what we did was we put on the Roswell crash newsphere. The newspheres are videos that are like five minutes long that summarize the major points, the big ones for the we're going through all of our past projects, and hopefully the idea is that you'll watch the newspheres and then go watch the originals. Go to FARSIGHT'S.com and watch the originals. Now, on FARSIGHT'S.com, we're going to be releasing the next major mysteries, which is the European protests that are coming, like this year, in the remainder of this year. But last Monday, we put up the newsphere for the Roswell crash as a spotlight. It was only a 5-minute thing, but the reason we wanted to do that was because the Roswell crash anniversary, 79th anniversary, is next week, and we thought it was so important. We said, let's have people just watch that newsphere. Well, it turns out that not too many people watched it because I didn't have it inside one of these spotlights. So I'm going to show it to you now in the spotlight so that you can watch it this time, and then you can get it again in FARSIGHT'S.com. In addition, later on today, and just about an hour or two after the spotlight, we're going to be uploading the new newsphere as well, which is on Area 51, which is really powerful. But that will be only available on FARSIGHT'S.com. But the Roswell crash, that is going to be we try to put out 2 of these a week. One comes up, we put them in spotlight so everyone on YouTube can see it, but the other one we put only up on FARSIGHT'S.com, so you have to go there to see all of the others. We have a large collection of newspheres now. Okay, so these are really great. And remember, the newspheres are very objective. We have an AI read the transcripts of our projects and objectively analyze it, come up with the script, and the AI presents it totally. So it's an objective evaluation of the actual project, and the AI knows what every word that's on the project because it read the entire transcript, which we offer. All of our transcripts we offer for free on farsight.org. So Farsight is the only place where not only we show you our data, we show you how we collect our data, and we show you evidence of everything, but that's the only place that you can see the total records of everything that we do. We don't hide anything. You can't get that anywhere. Nowhere. You can't get that anywhere. Okay, so let me show you the Roswell thing, and then I have some other things coming right after that. Okay, but let me show you the Roswell video.
History is a constructed narrative. At Farsight, we cut through the official constructed narrative and place the truth in front of you, plain to see. The Roswell UFO crash, a fragile manufactured shell built over a massive, undeniable truth to keep a population asleep. In July 1947, over the arid, hardscrabble landscape of Corona, New Mexico, that shell violently cracked open. That told the public it was a weather balloon. A convenient, desperate lie designed to mask an event that forever altered the trajectory of human history. Today, using advanced scientific remote viewing under strict, blinded protocols, we tear away the redactions and the cover-ups. We look directly at the Roswell crash. Before the fall, there was the flight. 3 expert remote viewers, Dick Allgaier, Daz Smith, and Aziz Brown, independently locked onto a structured extraterrestrial craft moving through the sky. It was not a primitive machine of rivets and jet exhaust. It was sleek, aerodynamic, and curved like a pumpkin seed wrapped in an iridescent metallic skin that felt tangibly smooth, almost organic, with a microscopic granular texture. It didn't just fly, it flowed, manipulating local gravity. Inside the hull, the navigation wasn't done with analog dials. It was a complete 3-dimensional virtual reality grid, a vast holographic display mapping physical space, time, and complex dimensional waypoints. The crew operating this exotic vessel were distinctly non-human. They were biological entities with frail, slight bodies, grayish skin, and oversized heads dominated by massive, deeply piercing eyes. They functioned as a highly regimented, goal-oriented unit operating with intense cognitive focus and telepathic precision. They originated from a pristine, terraformed reality, traveling in vessels quite possibly grown through advanced nanoscale fabrication. They were part of a larger fleet, positioned in orbit, quietly observing the chaotic development of Earth. But this observation was violently interrupted. The viewers describe a sudden, catastrophic energy event in the upper atmosphere. This was not a pilot error or a mechanical failure. It was an external, ionizing strike. A massive surge of plasma, crackling with intense Tesla coil-like electricity, instantly enveloped the hull. The atmosphere charged, and spiderwebs of disruptive, purplish-blue energy paralyzed the craft's exotic propulsion systems. As the vessel plummeted erratically out of control, tumbling toward the desert floor, something profound and deeply moving occurred within the minds of the crew. While one being frantically attempted to interface with the dying controls, another simply accepted its fate. Looking directly into the mind of this entity in its final moments, there was no human panic. Instead, there was a complex, beautiful, emotional blend, a paralyzed acceptance wrapped in an internal mental soundscape, resembling deep whale songs. Remarkably, as it faced its own inevitable death, this highly advanced being was far more concerned about the human subjects on the ground than its own survival. Then came the violent impact, embedding the craft deeply into the remote Earth. The silence of the desert was quickly broken. Human military teams converged on the wreckage. A stoic, deeply burdened officer arrived on the scene, a man thrust into a terrifying paradigm shift, carrying a deadly secret he knew he could never share with his family. The wreckage, alongside the bodies, some killed instantly, perhaps one still clinging to life, were secured and transported. Deep within classified underground hangars, human scientists and military personnel stood in awe, confusion, and fear, placing the debris on scaffolds, dissecting a technology that shattered their understanding of the universe. The Roswell event was not a myth. It was a tangible, violent intersection of human military reality and advanced off-world intelligence. The secrets extracted from that shattered hull were buried deep within the black budget architecture of the military-industrial complex, purposefully locked away from humanity to maintain control. But consciousness cannot be contained, and memory cannot be erased forever. This is the time of disclosure. And to understand the truth without being blinded by the official narrative, you need to watch the Farsight Project on the Roswell event that can be found on farsightprime.com. The blindfolds are off. We are looking back, and we are finally claiming our truth.
All right, here we go. So I want to show you something here. This is a book by Ralph Pizzulo, who's an investigative reporter, and it's called Stolen Elections, okay? He was actually on a podcast recently that he talked a lot about it. Now that particular book, Stolen Elections, it's incredibly well documented. You know, the amount of information that he got, and citing its sources and everything is extraordinary. So it's not being talked about a lot elsewhere, but apparently it's been a matter of heavy discussion within the Defense Department, CIA, FBI, and so on. And apparently there is software that was originally funded by Venezuela under Maduro. And software companies were heavily involved with this. You know, the ones who made the voting machines that people vote on were heavily involved with doing this. And according to the book, the software is now well understood and used by intelligence agencies, lots of places, including the United States intelligence agencies and other agencies. And what it's used for is to flip elections. Apparently this software has been available starting in 2018. No, actually it was 2008. It was the very first usage of the software was 2008. That was the Obama election. And the basic idea is that if the book is true, and like I said, I have the book and I've gone through it, and I listened to him first on the Danny Jones podcast on YouTube, but I then got the book and read the book. I was really amazed by how well documented it was in terms of citations and sources and so on like that. So apparently this software is being used to flip elections all over the world. And basically you can't trust any elections. So the whole issue, this may go back to 2008. You just can't trust any elections, no matter what. And apparently the software was going to be used in 2024, according to Pizzulo, to flip the election so that Kamala Harris would end up winning. And that was stopped by the intelligence agencies who didn't want that interference to occur. But apparently this type of interference has been regular and ongoing. And they flipped not only national elections, but congressional elections, gubernatorial elections, mayoral elections, and not just in the United States, they flipped them all over the world. Wherever there are electronic voting machines, they can flip those elections. And I'm an academic. I have seen academics on television say, this is impossible because the voting machines aren't even connected to the internet. That is so stupid. These things can be set up in the manufacturing process. Those machines all have software that has to be upgraded, uploaded, there are so many access points, so many vectors, and they can say they're not connected to the internet, and they can still be connected to the internet. Everything isn't transparent. This software is extremely sophisticated, and it's extremely difficult to find any evidence that the software was used to flip elections. So, here we have elections in the United States that are coming up. And that's going to be in November 2026. If Donald Trump has a continuation of the bad streak that he's been in right now, with the economy running into trouble, as well as the Middle East war and Iran running into trouble, and then if the war kicks up in Ukraine again, big time, with Russia expanding it into Western Europe, which our remote viewing results seem to suggest will happen, then it may become such a disruptive event that we don't know what's going to happen with the elections. So the possibilities are nothing will happen, and the elections will simply be honest and fair and free. Or they could be canceled if the disruptions enter into the continental United States and you see explosions and disruptive stuff happening, missiles and things like that. If that type of stuff starts happening in the continental United States, would that be a reason to cancel the elections or postpone the elections? That's a good question. How can you have an election if there's civil unrest? Big time. I mean, for example, in Ukraine, there's been no elections. First of all, the election that got President Zelensky elected, that was a result of a coup that was supported by the United States and supported by the national security people in the United States. There was a coup, and no one disputes that it was a coup. They had a democratically elected government, a president, and there was a coup. The guy was thrown out, and then Zelensky was brought in. Now, since then, there's been no election after that, so, the people that control these things are very careful about elections. If they don't want the result of an election to happen, they do whatever they want to do to make sure that result doesn't happen. Now, I wanted to connect this to James Madison's Federalist 10 that I talked about earlier. James Madison's Federalist 10 was really concerned about factions, and the whole United States government was set up to prevent factions from taking over. Well, we have a mass democracy now where everybody can vote. Women can vote, wage earners can vote, people of color can vote. So, things have changed. Now we have a situation where the people that are powers that be are like what James Madison and John Adams and George Washington and all those people were like. They didn't want certain factions to take over. So that type of thinking still exists. The founding fathers of the United States were never people who said, we want everyone to be able to participate. We want free elections. No, they were not like that. That was not it. Never. So that situation exists today where the people that have power do not want certain groups, factions, to take power. And in Ukraine, they didn't like the result of their democratic election, so they had a coup. They threw the person out and they put Zelensky in instead. That's what it is everywhere. And in the United States elections, we simply don't know. So if Dan Pizzolo's book, Stolen Elections, is correct, and I really recommend people to buy it and to read it, then you can't really trust any election that happened. So that's just a real question. You can't trust any results ever with regard to that, as long as there's electronic voting that's taking place. And the motive is the same motive you get with the founding fathers of the United States. They didn't want majority factions to take over. And there was only one part of the government that they were going to make that even slightly possible, and that was the House of Representatives. But it could be stopped by the Senate, could overrule everything, an appointed president who could veto anything, and a Supreme Court that was appointed by the appointed other people. Do you get the idea? So, when you hear about the disclosure movement taking place, I want you to think about the politics. I want you to think about James Madison. I want you to think about Federalist 10. I want you to think about what would happen if the people knew what was really going on. If you had a majority faction that actually knew and could make a decision. That's what the good ETs want. They want a majority faction to know the truth so that the good ETs can then get a good reading on what the people of humanity want. And if they want the good ETs to intervene and get rid of the bad ETs and free this planet, then they have the military power to do that. But they have to get that information to you. So as we move into the month of disclosure, if there's any movement that's going to happen at all in the month of July, remember, it's not, are the extraterrestrials real? That's not the question. Only an idiot would question that. And that includes almost all university professors who question that. Okay, but the real question is not, do the extraterrestrials exist? The real question is, who are the extraterrestrials and what have they been doing all this time? And don't tell me we have no proof that they exist. I have shown you, we have shown you at Farsight how to take video photography of their ships that are right above your house all the time. Don't rely on some fake picture that you don't know if it's right or if it's correct or not. We show you how to do it yourself. So even if you don't do it yourself, you can know somebody who is willing to get the camera out and make the appropriate adjustments and take the videos. I mean, you can, the point is, you have access to the ability to know that the information is correct. So everything that we do is verifiable at Farsight, and that's what we're trying to do here with you, to give you verifiable stuff. So the last thing I want to say is that the next Newsphere is on Area 51. Now, if you really think that Area 51 is just a bunch of shacks out in the middle of the desert, watch the Newsphere and then go watch the original project on Area 51 to know what's really there. Everything is hidden from you. It's all underneath Area 51. Everything. We show you everything. All right. Well, look, I've talked for, I think I talked for an hour. And yeah, actually, I just passed an hour in a few minutes. So I want to thank you all for being here. This is a really great spotlight. And if you go surfing, make sure you don't go out during the red flag days, and don't be embarrassed about wearing a life preserver if you need one. And always be a good swimmer when you go out there as well. All right, everybody. Love you all. I want to thank you so much for being here and listening. And I will be with you next week, next Sunday, same time as here, for the next Spotlight and a couple more Newspheres. All right? See you then. Remember, go to FarsightPrime.com. That's the only place you're going to get the truth. Watch those videos that we have made for you to give you the truth. All right? FarsightPrime.com. And talk to you next. Bo, look also for the European protest stuff that's going to be coming out just in a couple days. All right? All right. Talk to you later. See you in a week. And keep tuned to everything we're putting out on Farsight. We put out an awful lot of videos every week. So keep tuned to all that. Love you, everyone. See you next Sunday. All right? Okay, bye now.